For corporate events, here's a little trick. And I'll tell you this. I will actually share some true honesty here. I mean, I'm always honest, but I will really share this. We booked a Netflix event. And they came and they were like, we're looking at 2 or 3 other DJs. So we want you to DJ, this nighttime thing all the way through into the morning. We're gonna binge the entire season. In between episodes, you guys are gonna MC, get the energy up, DJ, they're gonna send them to the candy. It's really, really a cool little event. So the lady says, okay, give me your quote. Now, this was before I'd done any corporate shit, right? Any real corporate shit. I'm like, okay. And I started doing the math. I'm like, this many hours. Okay, this is 2 people. All right, DJ equipment, blah, blah, blah. They're going to supply this. I don't have to bring anything. Okay. So it's this much. And I gave him a number. And, the person who was booking us calls me back and says, hey, I need you to raise your rate. I said, what do you mean? That's what it costs for me to do this. He says, I understand. I need you to raise your rate because the other 2 DJs are 3 times as much as you. So I need you to raise your rate to at least them. That way we can get you booked. What I quoted them wasn't a low amount. It was a very reasonable amount. And I said, okay. So I raised the rate and then we got booked the next day. You cannot go into any corporate environment thinking about just numbers. It's more about the whole atmosphere. It's everything you're providing, plus your skill level, plus you, and you actually have to make them feel uncomfortable. There's this guy that's saying, anytime you give a quote, if you're not making them feel uncomfortable, then your rates aren't high enough. Now, you can, of course, price yourself out completely, but it's better to price yourself higher and then either have them come down, or negotiate. I have a friend of mine, I'm not going to say her name, but she took a gig for one of the larger entertainment companies out there. And when she took the gig, she researched them. And she found out that she found out that it wasn't just that gig they were doing. They were doing like 10 other gigs throughout the next 6 months. So she came back and said, okay. They said, well, what's your quote for this gig? She's like, no, this is what I'm going to do. I want you to pay me. And when I say it was a ridiculous amount of money, it was a ridiculous amount of money. You pay me this ridiculous amount and I will do all of your events, all 10 of your events over the next 6 months. She left. A couple days later, they came back and said, deal. She bought a brand new Mercedes cash. That's all I'm saying. So just because you're uncomfortable with the number doesn't mean that they're uncomfortable with the number. We just have to realize that it's not your money. And that's probably the one thing we try to put our mindset into this corporate mindset, which is not the same. They have marketing budgets that they have to spend. They have to get rid of this money. So it doesn't really matter to them what things cost as long as it's in their operating budget. So we have to go in and saying, you came to me, this is how much I charge. This is how much I charge. And let them tell you no. Then better than them telling you yes for a lower amount and you get there and you're like, oh my God, I could have charged $10,000 more. Could you think about how you feel knowing you could have charged $10,000 more for an event? Like, how do you walk away from that event feeling good about yourself? Can you ask corporations what their DJ budget is? They never have a DJ budget. They have an entertainment budget, but you're probably one of many entertainers. But you can ask, but they probably won't tell you, in all honesty. You're kind of putting yourself in a box if you ask them what their budget is. Because if they say, oh, we're doing this corporate event, and like, what's your budget? Our budget is $5,000 for a DJ. Okay. then you're in your mind, you're going to go, I guess it's $5,000. You're not going to say, well, give me 7,500. You're never going to say that. If their budget is 5,000, you're going to be like, okay, 5,000. You'll probably even think about it the opposite way and come in at like 4,500 to make yourself look better, which is also a silly way of thinking about things. So instead, ask them what it is, find out what your responsibilities are, find out who you're representing, find out what the event is about, and then give your price accordingly. Give your price accordingly. The question is always, will they pay it again? That's always the question. But for corporate stuff, you can assume that corporate stuff is going to continue to rebook you. So especially if it's like icing, like your cake is your everyday weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff like that. That's what you typically do on the weekends. So any type of corporate event is just icing on the cake. So if that's the case, you make as much money as you can. You make as much money as you can. You do a fantastic job. So then they can see the value added for what they paid for, because there's nothing worse than them paying a ridiculous amount. And then you get there and you're half-assing it. And then they're like, oh, well, we shouldn't have paid for this one. So it just depends. It just depends.